A young boy named Alk was busy fishing by the lake one day when a strange man suddenly approached him and asked if he'd like to learn some magic. The offer sounded way too good to pass up, so from then on, Alk would spend the entire day training with Eldis to become a mage. One particular day, Eldis was giving Alk a lesson on how to use fire magic in case he ever needed to protect others, and it was a little more complicated than what Alk was used to, but he eventually got the hang of it. He was a little disappointed that it took him a whole day to master fire magic, but Eldis reminds him that most people have to study for an entire month to accomplish what he just did in a single day, so he should be proud of himself. Alk still wants to learn more, so he asks Eldis to continue teaching him. But he says they've done enough for today, so instead he suggests that they should just do some fishing until it's time for Alk to go home. Alk ends up agreeing to take a break, but he's not happy about it because he wants to learn magic as quickly as possible. Eldis chuckles and tells Alk that he has incredible talent for magics, so even if Eldis hadn't started training him, he's sure Alk would have become an exceptional mage on his own. If that's the case, then Alk asks why Eldis even bothered teaching him in the first place, and Eldis has his reasons, but before he could explain anything, a fish took the bait and started pulling on his line, so both he and Alk immediately dropped the conversation and tried to pull it up with all their might. The next day, Alk's training continues, and this time, Eldis has brought a magic book for him to read, but to Alk, it's more confusing than the time they started adding letters to math, so it takes a while for him to understand. Over the next few months, Eldis takes his time explaining all the magical formulas to him, and little by little he comes to understand them. However, by spring the next year, when it was time for their usual training session, Eldis came bearing some bad news. He said he has to leave the capital soon, so he won't be able to train Alk anymore, but before he leaves, he wants to give his student a friendly warning. With his talent, Alk could easily become a court magician if he wanted to, but Eldis told him that if anyone ever offered him the job, he should turn it down immediately because it's not worth the trouble. He then turns to walk away, but before he leaves, Alk has one final question for him. So he asks why Eldis chose to teach him magic in the first place, and Eldis explains that he did it because Alk's mother did him a huge favor while she was still alive, so he wanted to repay that kindness by looking after her son. Several years later, Alk is now a student at the Royal Academy, and he has just found one of the school's old yearbooks, so he flips through it and finds the section about Eldis. Just as expected, Eldis was the top graduating student at the time, and he became a court magician shortly after, but for some reason he ended up getting banished from the kingdom, which is probably why he was forced to leave Alk back then. In that moment, Alk decides that the best thing he can do is become a court magician to change the opinion of the imperial court so he can repay Eldis' kindness, completely forgetting that that's exactly what Eldis told him not to do, and fast forward a little, we see Alk getting banished just like Eldis was. Alk had joined the hero party consisting of the crown prince, Regulus, a mage named Lini, and a knight named Ix, but while they were in the middle of a mission, Regulus tells him he's fired. Alk doesn't understand why Regulus would suddenly want to get rid of him like this, so he explains that as the crown prince, his job is to be on the front lines with his sword, Lini is meant to push enemies back with her magic, and X blocks enemy attacks for the party. But all Alk ever does is stay in the back and cast support spells like defense or enhancement. Alk tries to argue that there's an important reason he does that, but Regulus cuts him off and says someone who can only use support magic is too pathetic to be a member of the hero party. Keep in mind that Alk never even wanted to join this stupid party in the first place, but after he became a court magician, the prince ordered him to join, and he couldn't refuse a royal command. Lini and Eggs join in and start calling Alk useless, but the prince is the one who's really useless here. He literally made a rule that commoners like Alk aren't allowed to carry weapons, just because he doesn't want anyone else to steal his spotlight. Alk tries explaining to him that he thinks it's important for all party members to be armed and prepared in case of emergencies, but the prince hasn't had an intelligent thought for years at this point, so he will not tolerate a free thinker like Alk. He tells him that he isn't needed anymore, so he should just go home, and Alk is left questioning his life choices because he did not sign up to be insulted by an ungrateful man-child. Up to this point, Alk had put in an insane amount of effort to compensate for Regulus' stupidity, because he would have died a long time ago otherwise, but even after he was fired, he still wanted to help as much as possible. So he wrote out some monster attack patterns and strategies for Regulus to use next time he goes into the dungeon. However, while he was on his way to deliver the letter at the castle, he was suddenly stopped at the gates by the guards. They informed him that he had been stripped of his title as a court mage, so he no longer has permission to enter the castle. Just then, Lini shows up and she's just here to rub Alk's unfortunate situation in his face because she has always hated him. He was praised to no end when he graduated from the Magic Academy and set a new dungeon record, so she has been jealous of him since day one. After she's done mocking him, she turns around to leave, but Alk begs her to at least deliver this letter to the king for him. It was King Furcus who ordered him to join Regulus' party, so for Regulus' sake, it's important that the king reads this letter. However, Lainey couldn't care less about Alk's stupid letter, so she rips it to shreds right in front of him and orders the guards to kick him out. It has been 4 years since Alk graduated and became a court magician, and he tried his absolute best to fix the problems with the imperial court, but in the end, he couldn't change anything. Just then, Alk hears a familiar voice call out his name, so he turns around and finds Yorha, an old friend of his, standing there. She runs over for a hug once she realizes it really is him, and afterwards, they sit down by the canal to talk. Alk explains everything that happened to him since the last time he saw Yorha, and she yells that she can't stand the kingdom of Galdina because the nobles are always so focused on discriminating against the commoners. Alk agrees with her, but he tells her to quiet down because it'd be troublesome if someone were to overhear her rant. She tells him it's fine since no one else is around right now, and regarding Alk's current situation, she feels bad for everything he had to go through, but she's actually glad that he got kicked out of the prince's party, because that means there's nothing stopping him from joining a new party now. And on that note, Yorha asks Alk if he'd be willing to come clear dungeons with her party. Alk asks her if she's really okay with recruiting someone like him, but she knows better than anyone that Alk is a beast when it comes to magic, so there's no one else as qualified as he is. Hearing someone finally acknowledge his strength brings a tear to Alk's eye, so he gets up and tells Yorha that he'd love to join her party. The next morning, the two begin their journey to the city of Faisal, and Alk has flashbacks to what elders told him about avoiding the imperial court, and how things would have been so much easier for him if he had just listened to his advice, but it's not like he can change the way things played out now. Meanwhile, back in the capital, Regulus has just been informed that Alk left the capital and calls him a sorry excuse for a mage. He'd only ever forced Alk to join his party because everyone called him a magical prodigy, but he hated having a commoner on the team, so he's glad he got rid of him. Lainey adds that now they can get a replacement who is of pure noble blood, and without an incompetent fool like Alk slowing them down, Regulus will become famous for clearing a dungeon faster than anyone else. A few days later, Alk and Yorha arrive in the city of Faisal, and she begins telling him all about how wonderful this place is because it doesn't discriminate against commoners, and it's the perfect base for an adventuring party. Speaking of which, that reminds Yorha that they still need to get Alk registered as an adventurer, so she leads him to the guild so he can get started. Unfortunately, when they get inside, the receptionist tells Alk that he doesn't qualify. You need a special license to go past level 30 in a dungeon, and you need to be registered with the guild for at least 2 years to qualify for that license, so Alk won't be able to get it for a while. Yorha asks if they can make an exception for him, but the receptionist says she can't change the rules. Yorha can't believe this is happening, even though she sent her friend Keisha to come ask for special permission before they got here. But it turns out that Keisha was incredibly rude to the receptionist, so they won't be getting any favors from her anytime soon. Yorha is really disappointed since her party has already reached the 52nd floor of the dungeon, and they won't be able to make any new progress with Alk until he gets his license in 2 years. She realizes that there's no point in complaining about it now, so she says they should just focus on the places Alk is allowed to go in the meantime. He doesn't need the pass to go into areas above level 30, so there's still plenty of exploring for them to do as a group, and she wants him to enjoy his time here. Later that day, Alk and Yorha head into one of the dungeons and are currently facing a swarm of red hornets. Yorha casts enhancement magic on him so he can take down a few of the hornets, but that barely leaves a dent in their numbers. She doesn't understand why things got so difficult so quickly, since level 2 was never this hard to clear before, but Alk thinks something must have happened to the hornet nest, which is why all of them are in a frenzied state right now. Yorha puts up a defensive shield and charges into the swarm, but Alk warns her to stay back because it'd be much safer to maintain their position and take the hornets out one by one. Yorha yells that he needs to remember what he was like before he became a court magician. Back then, a swarm of hornets like this would have been no match for him, and he now realizes he doesn't have to hold back to avoid bruising the prince's ego anymore, so he is free to use as much magic as he needs. He stops restraining himself and uses attack magic to burn up a few of the hornets, and once he regroups with Yorha, he uses a wide area thunderbolt spell to fry the remaining bugs. However, just when it seemed like the battle was over, a giant earthworm emerges from the ground and grabs Yorha. This thing must have been the reason the hornets were acting so crazy earlier, and it's definitely going to eat Yorha if he doesn't do something soon, so he needs to act quickly. He has a plan in mind, but just to make sure it will work, he asks her if her defense magic is still as strong as it was back when they were in the academy, and in response she asks him if his attack magic is still as strong as she remembers it to be. They both trust each other's capabilities, so Alk begins casting his fire tornado spell, completely engulfing the worm in a torrent of flames. Yorha was caught up in the flames as well, but Alk knows her shields are more than enough to protect her from flames of this intensity, so there's no need for him to worry. Once Yorha is back on the ground, she tells Aok that his magic is still just as amazing as before and she can't wait to meet up with the rest of the team so they can have fun just like old times. This was the end of episode 1. Subscribe to not miss the next part.